This is my classroom, where I teach English to just about half of Harwood's ninth grade class. Teaching English is a great challenge because of how many different skills students need to show proficiency in, from reading to writing, speaking and listening, and language. Using technology, specifically a one-to-one iPad program, gives students lots of chances to practice these skills, to learn, and to show their learning in unique ways. This diagram is called the SAMR model and was introduced by a guy named Dr. Ruben Puentedera back in 2006. It's a way of describing how technology integration can evolve in our classrooms over time. It's also a good framework to know and reflect on to help determine how well we as educators are using technology to enhance learning in our classrooms. Here's another view of the SAMR model in Harwood colors. Notice that it looks like a set of steps, as if you're climbing up towards the highest level of technology integration in your classroom. But it's got to start somewhere, with simple substitution. In this phase, technology is simply substituting a task which you could do without technology. The next step up is augmentation, where there is some functional improvement, but it's still a basic tool substitution. Beyond that, we reach the phase of modification, where you use technology to significantly redesign a task. Finally, when you're really high-flying at the ninja phase of technology integration, you've reached redefinition, where you are doing tasks that are impossible or inconceivable without the use of technology. Sometimes as a teacher, I feel a little like this guy, and it's not because I'm going bananas despite what students might say. It's because there's just so much to balance and to juggle between content that needs to be taught, skills that need to be practiced, the new expectations of the Common Core and proficiency-based graduation. It's just a lot to wrap your mind around. How do you throw technology into that mix and not get totally overwhelmed? It's all a question of keeping things in balance. You can't expect to redefine everything that you're doing through technology on day one, or all the time for that matter. So what does technology integration actually look like in my English class? How do I try and keep this all balanced, and how is it affecting student learning? Take the following as just a snapshot into some of the activities, lessons, and learning opportunities students have been engaged in since September. Despite its lowly status at the bottom of the hierarchical steps of technology integration, I actually use quite a bit of substitution in my classroom. Specifically, anytime we read short texts, whether it's an article, an essay, a poem, or a short story, I like to embed questions and share that with students as a PDF to then read and answer in Notability. This allows students to keep digital copies of everything that we've read, to save a copy of their work both in Notability and then in Google Drive, and then to be able to reflect on what they've read during the course of the year. This specific piece of work is a short biography of Harper Lee, the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. The questions in colored underlines are my own, and the answers are the student's own work. This file was shared by me through Schoology with all of my students, completed by each individual, submitted to Schoology for grading, and then saved by each student to their English folder for future use. This next example of one way in which I've integrated technology into my classroom for the benefit of students and their learning shows augmentation, or how technology can add some functionality to a task which we've done without technology in the past. I've used surveys a lot in the past to get feedback from students or to introduce new topics, but in this case I wanted to introduce To Kill a Mockingbird by showing students that this book is woven through with controversial social issues that are still relevant today. This survey asks them to state their opinion about a variety of these issues. They took the survey anonymously one day in class, and the very next day I was able to share all of the results of their peers with each individual. We analyzed this data and used it to have a lively discussion and debate in class. This data exists for us to refer back to as we continue to read this novel and think about the issues that bring it to life. This next example of one way in which I've integrated technology into my class this year shows modification, or how technology can significantly alter the design of a task. I found myself with a window of time between our first unit on the hero's journey and our second unit on the Self, Society, and To Kill a Mockingbird. In this window of time, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to do some creative writing and to use technology to greatly enhance the writing process. It all started with this blog post I stumbled upon over the summer. An illustrator, an intern in fact, by the name of Ella Frances Sanders, had posted 11 untranslatable words from other languages and cultures that she had illustrated and posted on the website of the company with whom she was working. I was far from alone, however, in being enamored with Miss Sanders' work. In fact, her post was so popular that she was offered a deal and has now published a full book filled with untranslatable words called Lost in Translation. This is by far my favorite, however. Colicino, that wet circle left on a table by a cold glass. After a brief discussion of the power of language, in which each student selected a favorite word and used sketch to show their classmates what they think it adds to the English language, I shared this blog post, and each student examined the 11 untranslatable words. Students were then tasked with choosing one of these 11 untranslatable words and coming up with the idea for a story based around the meaning of that word. Students needed to plan their story out in broad brushstrokes, either on paper or on a digital form of the same piece of paper. That's called substitution. And then they were given the opportunity to write their stories in class using Google Drive. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I started to follow the illustrator Ella Frances Sanders on Twitter, and I told her what we were up to and how we were writing stories based on her blog post. She was psyched and wanted to read the stories. I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to tell the students. Students by now had finished their rough drafts, and now it was time to revise. They looked at a rubric to see what they wanted feedback on, shared their stories with a peer, got some feedback, and now we'll be finishing these stories up and posting them on a blog, sending them directly to Ella Frances Sanders and the rest of the world, who can read these stories in their published form on each student's blog. The final example I'll share with you showcases redefinition, or doing a task which was previously impossible and even unimaginable to me before each student had an iPad in their hands. This is a project that was the culmination of our work in the first quarter on the hero's journey. I asked each student to write and illustrate an original children's book to show their understanding of the stages of the hero's journey, a pattern of stages that characters have gone through all the way back from Odysseus up through Harry Potter and Katniss Everdeen. After completing the rough draft on paper, I asked students to use a great app called Book Creator to make a digital, permanent, and shareable version of their books. They photographed or recreated their artwork digitally and recorded themselves reading the book, practicing their fluency in the process. These books were then shared with all of the librarians in our school district, who could then upload them onto iPads and share them with countless elementary school students to give our 9th grade students feedback on their work. As you can probably tell, teaching in a one-to-one environment is a bit of a juggling act, but I'm confident that students are learning quite a bit. They're using technology to help them in the writing process, to enhance their speaking and listening skills, to collaborate with peers, to practice using new vocabulary words, to share their work with a wider audience, to find evidence and analyze text. And I'm confident that the best is yet to come.